you'll see some of the handouts say RRP. That's really just for renovation, repair, and painting. Let's start with getting a couple terms out of the way first, because I'm going to be using them time and time again. HEPA both applies to vacuums and to your masks.
How you doing, Allison?
Good area. If you're going to be doing this kind of work, the mask, and this doesn't have to be a respirator, by the way, this mask qualifies. It is an N100, okay? That means that is the highest rated HEPA filter you can get. You don't want to use N95 or 90. You want to be using the N100 or the 100 HEPA. This applies also to the filters on a vacuum. I'll get a little more into the vacuum in a minute. You'll notice on some of this, now this one says N100. You'll also find filters rated R and P. The only difference is N is not oil resistant. Okay, it's still a 100. R is oil resistant, and the P is oil proof. Our skins always have oil on them, plus if you're dealing with removing oil-based paints, there's going to be some oil still in the air, so you want to be make sure that your filters can handle that kind of work. So the N100 for the normal dust is fine. It's not oil resistant, but it's a temporary thing. The more heavily you get involved with anything dealing with an oil, you'll want to go to the higher rated filters, but always use the 100 rate filter, whether it's an N, R, or P. The vacuums that get used in this kind of work, just because your Hoover or Regina says it's HEPA, it has a HEPA filter in it, is it in fact going to be rated by the EPA? And do you want to use it? Vacuum can be your best friend or it can be your worst enemy. Most household HEPA vacuums cannot be used in this kind of work, simply because they're not totally sealed. There's always some air blow by in those things. So you definitely don't want to use them because you'll spread dust throughout the house. An EPA OSHA rated vacuum is a totally sealed unit, and the HEPA filter is the last filter the exhaust air goes through. There may be one or two other stages to take the dust out, whether it's a bag, the normal dust filters, mesh foam around the main filter. So some of these vacuums will have 2 and 3 different filters in them to clean the dust. But they are totally sealed, no air escapes them, and the HEPA filter is the last stage that all that air goes through. I used to give out lists of vacuums to people. I no longer do because everybody's got them on the market now. Originally, when I started this kind of work more than 5 years ago, there were literally 2 vacuums on the market that were rated by the EPA. Now there's probably hundreds out there. So if you're going to be doing this work, go onto the internet, just type in RRP vacuum, and you'll come up with all sorts of lists on vacuums. DeWalt's got them, Bosch's has them, Festool has them. I'm not talking about the normal, Hoover or anything like this. These are all shop vac type vacuums that are rated. And they will say that they are rated by the EPA if in fact they are. EPA, OSHA just printed their specifications about 2 years ago when the market started exploding on these. That people had the vacuums out there, but they couldn't say they were rated. Now they can say that. Any vacuum that is rated for abatement work is legal for this kind of work also. So if they say this is rated for abatement, that can be used. Or if it's EPA, OSHA rated, for abatement, it could be used. How does lead get into our systems? And who is most vulnerable? Any children under 6 or under, whatever. All right, because their brains, or pregnant women, by the way, because that gets into the system, it affects the fetus. So that pregnant women and children under 6 are where we're really looking, to focus on. Can an adult get lead poisoning? Yes. Us as adults can absorb about 10% of lead we're exposed to. Children, on the other hand, will absorb 90% of the lead they're exposed to. Where does most of the lead poisoning come from, and how does it happen? Either through eating or inhalation. Very fine dust particles, that's why we're using the HEPA 100 filters. And how much lead does it take to poison somebody? How about 6 grains of salt if it was pure lead and you've got deadly lead poisoning? 6 grains of salt, the equivalent of, okay, now this is very fine dust. You won't see it in a granular form, but the equivalent of 6 grains of salt is enough to poison a child. Same as an adult, but we won't absorb as much, okay? We'll only take 10%. What are some of the effects of it? Coma in a child, especially early children. Coma, death, anemia, you name it. It's extremely dangerous. Okay, learning disabilities because it's affecting the brain. In adults, it's more human reproduction that is affected. The rules will go by, first we want to identify, contain and cover, then your actual work in the cleanup is your different steps. Where do we focus on when we're looking for lead? Or if we think we know where lead is? What products of, let's say, a home and where most of this lead poisoning comes from? Illinois, by the way, is number 2 in the United States. Number 2 for lead poisoning in children. Okay, so it's not a game anymore, and that's why I teach these classes and why the EPA became involved, because it is very serious. We have thousands of children in Illinois right now with lead poisoning. Where does that mainly come from? Believe it or not, older farmhouses and big buildings that have been around for years and years, and now all of a sudden the building sells, a family of 4 moves in, they're renovating it, and guess what? Their children are poisoned. That's where the majority of this comes from, okay? Most of your lead paint you will find on windows, doors, and trim work, where mainly oil-based paints were. You won't find lead poisoning if the walls have been, or lead where the walls have been painted with latex paint, the ceilings with latex paint, and so on and so forth. So it's mainly your doors and windows and your trim work that usually got the lead-based paint. If you're working around that kind of thing, you definitely have to take precautions. Windows are the worst. Although doors get their fair share, a standard double hung window that is painted with lead paint, you're sliding it up and down all the time, especially in the summer to get breezes. That lead-based paint is doing this every time you slide that window up and down, and the dust is getting everywhere. Okay, you may not even see it. You may think it's outside dust sometimes, but every time the lead-based paint is sliding against each other on windows, that's what's happening. It's closing, opening a door, it's banging on itself. That's where most of it happens. If you're cutting into a wall for repair work, or even going to remove a wall, you definitely want to start containing this dust. So first we have to identify where we're going to work, and then how to contain it and get rid of it. In fact, if you're going to open up a wall, whether it's for, oh, I got a leak in the wall somewhere in plumbing work, it has to be repaired, an old pipe burst or whatever, or even if it froze and you get into it, or electric work or whatever it is. Maybe we want to take, because the plaster's all cracked, maybe we want to take all the old plaster off and put new plasterboard up so it's a nice smooth wall. All right. So we're identified where we're going to work and what exactly we're going to do. Now, how do we contain it? First off, whatever room you're working in, you're going to want to seal that room off. And when I say seal it off, I mean seal it off. Okay? Not just close the door, because there's spaces under the door and over the door and around the door. Same with the windows. Your easiest way to contain it, by the way, if you're working on a window and you're replacing windows, all right, you want to seal from the outside, because you don't want this dust going to the outside either and poison somebody else, all right? So if you are in fact taking apart windows, whether it is just to clean them up and put them back, paint stripping and so on and so forth, or you're putting in new double hung or whatever, you're taking out those windows and the associated trim work, you want to seal that opening from the outside. Just your normal plastic sheeting, duct tape will be fine. If you're inside the house, you're going to want to seal around that window with plastic, okay? Same thing. Now, can you seal the door off? Sure. As long as you think you can get all the work done in one day without going out that door, all right? If you want to leave for lunch, guess what? You can't, because you've got all this dust everywhere now, and how are you going to break for lunch? By the way, the number one rule on this kind of work is no eating or drinking, inside this work area, because ingestion is one of the main ways that lead gets into the human body, especially children. They like lead dust. They like lead chips of paint. Why do they like it? Because it tastes sweet to children. Quite literally, it tastes like candy. So why would somebody eat paint chips? Because the lead in children tastes sweet like candy. That's all. It's just something they pick up, and they're always putting something in their mouth anyway. So we want to at least be able to contain the work area, especially if you're going to be wanting to go out to get something to eat, and you're not going to finish it, or you're not going to finish in one day, where you can, just work all the way through and then do your cleanup, and you can unseal the room and you're okay. Let's say we have a wall that we're going to be punching holes in, or partially taken down. How do we work with this? First off, we're going to take 3 layers of plastic, okay? And for wherever we're working, you're going to want to take this plastic 6 feet away from where we're working and 6 feet out. So if we're cutting a 3-foot hole in a wall, 3 feet wide, all right, that's 15 feet of plastic. 6 to each side of that hole, and then 6 feet out, all right? We're going to tape that plastic. Where are we going to tape it? Are we going to tape it to the trim work or to the wall? We're going to tape it to the wall over the trim work, so no dust can get between the wall and the trim, all right? I mean, most of that, you look at it, there's all cracks on your trim work and the quarter round. You don't want dust getting in there, because it'll eventually get blown out. So We take 3 layers of plastic, one on top of the other. Now we're going to cut the wall or take the wall down. By the way, if you're taking a wall down to make 2 rooms into one, you have to seal both sides, okay? Because now you got 2 rooms. So if you're literally removing a wall, you have to contain both rooms, right? Once we have the offending wall down, or the trim work down, or whatever we're working on, okay, here's where the first layer of plastic comes in. Most of your dust, by the way, will be on that plastic. Lead dust is heavy. That's why they say 6 feet out will contain probably 90 to 95% of any dust that you're creating, if you're working right, and we'll get into that. That first layer of plastic can be taken up with all the dust and debris. The debris put into, by the way, heavy garbage bags, okay, and then those bags are sealed. All right, so all that first layer of plastic comes up. All the debris that you've created goes into the plastic bags, and the plastic bags are sealed. There are a number of rules for working around lead. First off, the number 1 rule is don't create dust, okay? So the best rule is work wet if you can. When they say work wet, you're not taking a fire hose or anything, but a little spray bottle perchance, a little water, and we use what's called amended water. All it is a couple drops of dishwashing soap, okay, in that water. A couple drops for this whole bottle is fine, because it helps it stick better to the wall, okay? So if you can work wet, both in scraping, hand scraping, by the way, or sanding, hand sanding, all right? We definitely want to try and stay away from electric sanders. Why? Because they spread dust everywhere, all right? If in fact you have to mechanically cut and sand, probably your best bet is a multi-tool, all right, with a vacuum attachment. I don't have the vacuum attachment on here, that goes to a HEPA vacuum, all right, which will again take out 95% of the dust you're creating. If in fact you're dealing with an OSHA rated property, I really can't even use this, all right? I literally have to deconstruct by hand. In other words, crowbars, hammers, hand saws, nothing electric in that environment. No torches if you're taking paint off. Anything that is going to burn paint is going to create lead smoke, which is an even finer particle than lead dust. Okay, something you definitely don't want to do. Most of your heat guns now that are out on the market are rated below 1100 watts, which will not char paint. A lot of the heat guns sold years ago were rated 15 to 1800 watts. Guess what? They're burning paint. Something you don't want to do. So make sure that if you're going to use a heat gun to strip paint, use one rated for it, under 1100 watts. Your best bet if you're stripping paint and remodeling, again, work wet. You want to use a wet stripper, okay, and hand scraping, not power sanding on this stuff. If you're going to do any sanding at all, I always recommend just hand sanding and hand scraping. Or if you have to, again, a multi-tool and or one of the little palm sanders and now they make that little jitterbug because it's only oscillating a little bit, okay, with vacuum attachments. But definitely not circular sanders, random orbital sanders, and things like that. You definitely want to stay away from those. Your best bet also, if let's say you're cleaning up the windows, send them to a stripping outfit. They put them in tanks. It's not your responsibility anymore. The only thing you have to worry about is taking the parts out, okay, and whatever little dust and chips that causes, send them out to be stripped. You don't have to worry about it at that point, okay? So that's an option you should look at also if you're doing that. All right, we've gotten rid of our debris. Now what do we do? Okay, we still got 2 layers of plastic on the ground. You effect your repairs, whatever it is, whether it's electric, plumbing, or just, again, putting back what you took off in a cleaner manner, okay? Effect your repairs, however long that's going to take, okay, you still want the area contained because there is still some dust there. You haven't done a thorough cleaning. So effect your repairs, any plastering you have to do, you know, putting the drywall back, so on and so forth. Just cutting drywall, you know what it causes. You know, there's dust everywhere just from cutting drywall, all right? Which is going to mix with some of the other dust that you haven't quite gotten rid of yet. The repair work is done, all right? You don't necessarily have to, you know, paint it right then and there because it's all clean now, but do the majority of the repair work while this room is contained. Second layer of plastic comes up because of all the dust you created during the repair work, okay? Whether again, you're chopping into the wall or replacing it or doing some repair, whatever you're putting back is gonna, again, just create normal construction dust, which can mix with the other dust. Second layer of plastic comes up, okay? That cleans up from the actual work site, all right? Now we get into the final cleanup. Now we have a final layer of plastic down that is, at this point, should be relatively clean. How do we clean, again, the final area, get it ready for a final cleaning? Well, first you work from the top down, okay? And this is where your vacuum comes in, and probably some dry static cleaners, you want to, you know, clean all the walls, anything that's in there, the fixtures, you want to make sure, and normally, working wet if you can with some of these wet wipes, and clean everything down to the best you can until you get to the floor and countertops and things like that. After that, we start the final cleanup. At this point, all this cleaning material and everything can literally, depending on what the floor is now, hopefully it's a hard floor and not carpeting, which if it was carpeting, you'd have to cover completely anyway. All right, we didn't even get into that, but if it's carpeting, the carpet's totally sealed off at that point. But if it's a hard floor, whether it's wood or tile or stone, or doesn't matter, that final layer of plastic and all the cleaning supplies and everything come off. You're still, at this point, probably still wearing some of the protective clothing, all right? That comes off you, all right, prior to the final cleaning. You're going to vacuum yourself down, take everything off. Again, it goes into the plastic, into the big heavy-duty trash bags. Why heavy-duty ones? So nothing punctures a hole in it and dust can escape, all right? There's even a method that they recommend on sealing this, and it's called a gooseneck design, where you twist the plastic into a regular tight twist the plastic, you fold it over and then seal it. So now you've got literally 3 seals on that plastic bag, so nothing can get out. Now, final cleanup works with mopping. The 2-bucket method, whether it's a setup like this or just plain 1 mop bucket and the cleaning solution bucket, okay? Why the 2-bucket method? Easy, because you don't want whatever you're mopping up to get into your cleaning solution water. Okay, that 2-bucket method also, it keeps the mop clean, gets whatever you're mopping up out and not contaminating your cleaning solution. Okay, we've gone through that. What's our final step? Wet wipes are your friend. All right, all my countertops or whatever else is in that room should be wet wiped down. All right, the floor, use the mop handle and a wet wipe. Here's a chart. I'll pass this around. This is my personal chart. It's stamped, by the way, with dates. So any inspector will know that I'm up to date. That is issued, through the agency. That's why it is literally stamped with dates on it right now. That's a new chart. And you compare the wet wipe you just used to that chart. If it's dirtier than that chart looks like, you do your cleaning again. And literally, I meant the whole cleaning routine, okay? Because you've just failed. Whatever you've mopped up, whatever you've vacuumed up, you've just failed to clean it properly. So you go through that whole routine again, okay? And again, the final step is going through and doing the wet wipe routine. And if in fact, your wet wipes, actually this is about as dirty as you'd want to get it to still pass. If it's cleaner than that, that's fine. If it's darker than this, you failed, okay, to clean up properly. And believe it or not, on just normal construction projects, this process saves a lot of time. If you were building houses or whatever and you try and work clean and you clean up as you go, even, the drywall installation and whatnot, you've saved yourself X number of hours of labor just on cleanup process. It used to be, we finished the drywall, and the whole crew would come in and clean up the house for a day. You're paying 5, 6 guys to clean a house for a day. If you would have cleaned up as you went along like this, you would have saved all that labor, believe it or not. Yeah, it takes a little time to put the plastic down or to seal a room or whatever, but in the end, you do save time, believe it or not. All right, some of our own protective gear, especially if we're suspecting lead, obviously the mask, most important of all. Tyvek suits, booties. If we're doing a lot of deconstruction where there's gonna be dust in the air, you might think about wearing a hood. Gloves, just standard gloves, no latex. Lead is so fine it can pass through latex gloves. So nitrile or whatever, but not latex gloves. A hat just to keep dust out of your hair. Do you want to wear goggles? Probably, especially if you're an eyeglass wearer, and you might want to use the goggles over that just to keep the dust, off the lenses itself. Always try and work wet if you can. If in fact your project is going to take a couple days and you can't effectively seal off the whole room because you have to get back out and get back in for a day or two or three, you know the work is going to take, and there's multiple people coming in, and obviously they're going to want a break for lunch. How do you do it? Well, we can, put up zip walls around the project itself and leave the doors open. All right. This way you can walk in and out. There's also what's known as a S-fold on your plastic once it's sealed to the ceiling and the floor. You can literally S-fold your plastic so that you have to go in and out 3 layers of plastic every time. When we come out, what are we going to literally do? We're going to vacuum ourselves out. If I'm going for lunch because we can't eat or drink in that work area and we're going to break for lunch somewhere, you have to vacuum yourself off for anything, okay? Because you don't want to take any dust on you and go through the house with it. Going to take a couple days. What are you going to do with your clothes? Well, there was a contractor in Illinois that he was just a contractor. Every day he'd come home, his work clothes were in the back of his car. He'd change the clothes as he got out, throw them in back, throw them in the laundry, blah, blah, blah. His kids got lead poisoning. Why? Because he was carrying the dust with him. Boy, this is a true story now. If you're going to wash your clothes, they get washed separately from all other laundry, just so you don't intermix that, okay? You don't want to take your dusty clothes from a construction site, even if you have been protected, okay? There is going to be some dust on your clothing. You know it's going to happen. All gets washed separately, so you don't contaminate the rest of your laundry with this stuff.
Do you have to be certified to do this, or is it only if you get cited for the lead?
No. Well, let's put it this way. You as a homeowner, do you have to be certified? No. If in fact, like myself, I'm an electrician and I'm cutting walls apart just to run electric, do I have to be certified? Yes, I do. Because it's part of my normal job where I'm cutting into walls, okay? A carpenter, the same way. A real estate firm where their guys are constantly going in and doing renovations, whether it's from busted pipes or whatever, okay? They have to go into walls too. So that real estate management firm has to have somebody like me on board that is trained to say, okay, this is what we have to do to contain this area. We don't necessarily know there's lead involved, but we suspect there is, so we're going to contain this area where we're working. You as a homeowner, no. You as a building owner, no. You don't have to be certified. But you still have to be careful, especially around children and pregnant women. Okay? If that is involved, in fact, you had best be taking precautions. If in fact you are cited by the city, through the building department that says, okay, you've got a building violation, you have lead in this building. Can you call me and say, come and fix it? No, you cannot. Now you have to go to an abatement firm, all right, who has the same training as me, but that is their job, in fact. They are an abatement firm. They've probably taken a little more training than I have, all right? They are certified to have all the proper equipment. Their equipment gets checked by the EPA and OSHA. Make sure that they have the proper equipment. So once you have a violation for lead, you have to contact an abatement firm. And believe it or not, that violation will stick with the building for 30 years at all levels, state, federal, whatever, okay? You sell the building in 10 years, guess what? That owner now has, the new owner now has 20 years because that violation doesn't go away for 30 years. That building is rated for 30 years as lead in this building. So it's a serious matter. If in fact you are caught doing renovation illegally where you know there's lead or you're doing it wrong, they can fine you $37,000 a day.
Renee to tools, please. Renee to tools.
Okay, I mean, it's actually 37,500 per day that you're doing something wrong like that. If in fact they come out and go, you're renovating and there's lead here. There's a story of, there was an 18-unit building that the building owner hired a firm to paint the porches. I guess there were 3 entrances, and the firm was playing loud music, shouting. They were obnoxious. Even the buildings next door complained to the owner. Nothing happened. They called the city. City came out, looked at the job, tested. I mean, there was paint chips and dust and things everywhere, and they found lead. Everybody got fined. The building owner, the construction crew. It was a disaster for everybody, okay? So, you want to work careful. You want to work wet. It's a serious business. The laws are written as such to be as lenient as possible, especially to a small building owner and a homeowner, okay? You can do your own work without getting certified like I am. But work careful, work smart, and work wet is the best I can say, and have the proper equipment. If in fact you have to use a vacuum, spend the money to get a proper vacuum. Like I said, that piece of equipment can be your worst enemy. You use a normal shop vac, dust, sucking up plaster dust, you know what happens. You're going to have plaster dust in every room of the house, okay? Because there's always escape through a non-contractor rated, abatement rated HEPA vac, all right? I mean, if you were doing this for a living all the time, you can go one step further and start doing negative air, which is nothing more than almost like a ventilator with a large HEPA filter and hose going to the outside that always draws fresh air into the work area as opposed to it getting blown out. All right, but you don't have to go that far as long as you're working smart.